This conference
Sir,
will
for
now
prime
be
number, how
recorded.
to do it? Can you please tell, sir, for prime number, the assignment?
No. Try that assignment today. I'm giving the time till today. Try that one, or else tomorrow I will show you practically. Okay. Now let's see. So in the previous session, we have discussed about the while iterative statement and do while iterative statement in order to execute the statements repeatedly till the required number of times based on the application requirement. Now, so today we'll see the for loop. So what exactly the for loop and what is the use? How the for loop syntax will look like? How can we write the code by using this for loop? We'll see practically today. Now, so now here in this case, when you go to the previous examples, whatever we have implemented as of now, in every program we did some common steps. Like it may be any program, whatever we have implemented by using while or do while. There, we have defined the variable and initialized the variable by using a separate statements. That means separate line of code. We have verified the condition by using a separate line of code. And then we have incremented or decremented the value by using separate line of code. That means what these are the common things which we have implemented as of now. But these are in separate line. This is two lines of code. This is another line. This is another line. 4 lines of code we have implemented, so that if the number of lines of code is keep on increasing, it will be looking like as a bit complex. It will be looking like as a bit complex, so that it will be taking more time to compile. It will be taking more time to execute. So it will be impacting on the application performance. So what I want to do is, I don't want to write these statements in 3 different lines. I want to combine these 3 lines of code into a single line, so that we can reduce the number of lines of code, so that we can make that code short. We can optimize that code. We can reduce the number of lines of code. Then how can we do that? Now let's see practically in this case. Now, so now as part of this while and the do while, so we are going to be writing these statements commonly. That means we are going to be defining the variables and initializing the variables with some value, and then we are verifying the conditions. We are incrementing or decrementing the values. Okay, we are incrementing or decrementing the values here. Now, so in this case here, it will be making this number of lines of code will be keep on increasing. So to reduce the number of lines of code, we are going to be using one more iterative statement that is called as for loop. Okay, that is called as for loop. Then what exactly the for loop? For loop is also one of the iterative statement which will be providing the optimized way of writing the code, which will be providing the optimized way of writing iterative statement. So this is also iterative statement. Here also we can use that code, but we can reduce the number of lines of code, so that we can able to optimize the code also. So that for loop is also one of the iterative statement which will be reducing the number of lines of code, which is providing an optimized way of writing or utilizing the iterative statements. Then how this for loop will be look like over here? What is the syntax of this for loop? Let me explain. So now we are using this first statement. Here we can write the statements whatever you want to execute. What are the statements that you want? We can able to write that statements as well. Write the statements. Now, inside this, when you go to the for loop, here we have to specify that initialization part. This is an initialization part where we can define the variable and initialize the variable with some values. Whatever the variables you want, we can define and we can initialize them with some values. Next one. Conditions part. That means conditional part over here. Here we can specify the conditions whatever you want. Next one. Increment or decremental part. Increment or decremental part. So in this case, as part of this for loop, we are having three parts are available. Initialization part, and then conditions part, and increment or decremental part. Now, so now here in this case, when you verify this one, previously what we did, initialization we did in a separate line, and the conditions we did in a separate line, and the increment or decrementing we're doing in a separate line. But now we are combining all these statements into a single line over here. Okay, all these statements you can combine into a single line with the help of for loop, so that we can reduce the number of lines of code. We can reduce the number of lines of code so that we can make it as optimized. So that we can make that code optimized. That facility is available to you. So now here in this case, when coming to the for loop, how the for loop will be getting executed over here? What is the syntax of execution? What is the flow of execution? Now let's see. Now, so in this case, so when coming to the for loop, whenever it is executing the statements, first of all, it will go to that for loop. Whenever it is reaching to the for loop, first of all, it is going to be initializing the variables here. Whatever the variables you have specified, those variables will be getting defined and initialized with some values. Once the variables have been getting initialized, then immediately it will be verifying the condition. Whatever the condition we have specified, that condition will be getting verified. It will check the conditions. Once the conditions have been getting satisfied, then it will be entering into that block of statements. If the condition has been satisfied, it will enter into the block over here. This is true. That means if the condition is satisfied, that means true, it will enter into the block. Once it has been entered into the block, whatever the statements are available, these statements will be executing once. This is the fourth part. So whatever the statements are available, these statements will be executing once. Once the statements has been getting executed once, then it will go to that increment or decremental part again. As a step 5, it will go to that increment or decremental part, so that it will be incrementing the value or decrementing the value. Once the value has been incremented or decremented, again it will check the condition over here. It will check the condition. If the condition gets satisfied, it will be entering into the block again. It will execute the statements one more time, and then it will check it will increment or decrementing the values. Once the values have been getting incremented or decremented, then again it will check the condition, and then it will be executing the statement one more time. Like that, this process will be keep on continuing. Okay, this process will be keep on continued, okay, till the condition will be getting failed. Once the condition get failed, it will be coming out from the block automatically by default. This is the seventh step. This is the flow of execution as part of for iterative statement. First of all, it is going to be initializing the variables with the respective values. Then immediately it will check the conditions. If the conditions has been satisfied, then only it will enter into the block and it will be executing the statements once. Once the statements have been executed, it will be incrementing or decrementing the values again. Then it will be checking the conditions here. Once the condition has been satisfied, again it will enter into the block. It will be executing the statements one more time. Like that, this process will be keep on continued till the condition is getting failed. Once the condition gets failed, it will be comes out of the block automatically by default. This is the flow of execution as part of this for loop. Okay, as part of this for loop, this is the flow of execution over here. Now, so now here in this case, now tell me, is it a pre-checking iterative statement or post-checking? It is also pre-checking, because before executing the statements, first of all, it is verifying the conditions over here. Okay, before executing the statements, it will be verifying these conditions first. So that here, when coming to the for loop is a pre-checking iterative statement which provides an optimized way of using iterative statements. Okay, it is providing an optimized mechanism. It is providing an optimized way of using iterative statements as part of your Apex programming here. Now, so now here in this case, how can we do this one? How can we use this for loop? Okay, now let's see practically in this case. Now, so let me give that note point here. It is a pre-checking iterative statement which provides an optimized way of using iterative statements inside the program. Inside the programming, it is providing an optimized way of utilizing iterative statements. Now, so now when coming to the for loop, then how can we use this one? How can we use this for loop in order to write the code, in order to execute that piece of code? Okay, now let's see practically in this case. Now, let's take a small use case. Now, let's take a small example. So write an Apex program to print the mathematical table for the given number. I want to print the mathematical table for the given number. So previously already we did this example by using while loop, but now I want to do with for loop. Let's see how the code will get differs. How many lines of code will be there in while loop? How many number of lines of code will be there in for loop? We'll see the difference. Now, how can we optimize this code? We'll see practically as well. Now, so now write an Apex program to print the mathematical table for the given number. So what we need to do, we have to define two variables. One is to store the value. For example, I want to generate the mathematical table for the number 234. So that I need to define a variable. And then I would like to have a counter value, which will be starting from 1. So two variables we need to use, which is of type numerical. So I'm using the for loop over here. I'm using the for loop. In the first part, initialization part, I'm defining this one. Integer counter equals to 1, comma, max number equals to some 345. This is the number for which I want to generate the mathematical table. So max number is a variable in which I am storing the value for which you want to generate the mathematical table. Now, I want to check the conditions over here. I want to execute this statement till the counter value is reaching to 10. I want to execute this statement till the counter value is reaching to 10. And every time I want to increment the counter value by 1. Okay, every time I want to increment the counter value by 1. So I want to increment the counter value by 1 every time over here. Now, after that, I want to print the statements here. Okay, I want to print the statement. So system.debug. Okay, I want to print the statement system.debug. So what is the value you want to print here? First of all, I want to print the mathematical table value. That means max number plus. After that, I want to give a star symbol plus counter value plus. After that, I want to give a equal to symbol. And then I want to generate that value. How can we do that? Max number into counter. That's it. Over. Simple 2 lines of code. Previously, to implement the same functionality, how many lines of code we have written by using for loop? Let's see. Here we have used 1 line, 2 line, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines of code. But now here we are going to be reducing it to simply 2 lines of code. So the 3 lines of code has been reduced.
So can we keep 2 data types?
Sorry?
Can we add two data types like counter value maybe 1.5?
No, 2 data types if you want to define, then define outside and then assign the values inside this over here. Okay? By separating a comma. Now. So now here in this case, we are defining the variable counter and then max number. 2 variables, both will be of type numerical. That means integer. Now, so I have defined these 2 variables, counter and the max number. For the max number variable, I have assigned the value for which I want to generate the mathematical table. For the counter variable here, I'm going to be assigning the value 1. And then I'm going to be iterating this statement till the counter value is reaching to 10. And every time I'm incrementing the value by 1. Okay, now. And then I'm preparing the formula over here. This is the formula or the format which I would like to generate that mathematical table over here. Now, so let me execute this piece of code. Click on execute. Let's see the result. Select the debug only checkbox. Now it is indicating that mathematical table for the specified number. Now, so now we have generated the mathematical table for the specified number as well over here. So like here 345 into 1 equals to 345, 345 into 2 equals to 690, like that. Up to 10 we have generated that mathematical table for the specified number as well. So that here depends upon your requirement, we can able to write the piece of code by using either while or do while or for. But as a best practice, always go with the for loop. Why? Because for loop is providing an optimized way of writing the code so that we can reduce the number of lines of code. If the number of lines of code has been reduced, what will happen? It will be reducing the complexity in the application. It will take less time to compile. It will take less time to execute so that we can improve the application performance also. So for that reason, always we can try to go with that for loop here so that we can able to optimize that code. Always we have to write the optimized code inside your Apex program. Okay, now. So whatever the programs you have implemented by using this while and the do while, same programs we can implement by using for loop also. The same functionality we can implement with the help of for loop as well. That facility is available.
Is there any functionality where we can type side by side the numbers?
Side by side numbers in the sense?
Like it is coming like one line after one line, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can print like sidewise.
No, side by side we can't print over here because here every system.debug statement will be printing in a separate line. But for loop will be executing multiple times and every time it is going to printing. Suppose if you want to print a side by side, then simply we have to go with a string, keep on append those values, and finally we can print the string value on your debug log file.
Hi Firoz. Firoz, I
Yes.
have one query.
in any point of time in Salesforce, do we require these things to be print and all?
No, not required. But basically, printing in the sense we have to print that lacks information. Upon
That's
executing
what.
some piece of code, we have to print the lacks information also.
So whenever we are going to deal with any projects or anything, like means we are
Compulsory we
not
have
going
to
to
print.
get.
Compulsory
Okay,
we have
means
to print the result in the debug local, because suppose for example in future, if the
we are going
customer
to.
said,
Yeah, tell me.
suppose in future if the customer is raising a query or if the application has been terminated abnormally, then how can we figure it out where exactly the problem?
No, system that debug that I am aware, means I'm okay with it, but I just want to know, like in any point of time in Salesforce, do means in future when I'm going and working inside the company, do I require to print a star or something like that?
No, that is not required. Nobody will print those stars, options, nothing. But this is for
Okay.
the mathematicals. Basically, to build the logic, we are going to be writing these kind of examples. Okay.
Okay.
Then
Okay.
moving forward, we are purely dealing with the records only. Okay, purely dealing
Yes.
with the
Yes.
objects and the records.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
Okay.
Salesforce deals with that only, so that's why I
Yes.
was asking actually. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So can you explain one pattern programming, sir, like square or pyramid, triangle, like that?
Not required. Nobody will use that one, because in Salesforce, nobody will use that square pattern programs. Nobody will use. Those are
Like
not
to
useful,
build.
basically.
Sir, better you can jump into something like object or something like that on this for loop. So, we will get
Hmm.
the idea on it.
We'll see that one. Okay. Now, so these are the three iterative statements we have discussed: while, do while, and the for loop. And the next one. Next one is we are going to be discussing about a feature called as arrays. We have enhanced for loop. Enhanced for loop we will be discussing after arrays, because for the enhanced for loop we need a collection. So that we are going to be discussing about a collection type called as arrays. Now, so it's the most important feature which will be very, very useful in the real-time implementation. In the entire development, simply 4 features are very, very important. If you know these 4 features, then development is very, very simple. First one is if conditions, all the 4 formats. Second one, for loop, that means enhanced for loop, which we are going to discuss. Third one, collections. Okay, third one, collection. And the fourth one, arrays. These 4 features. Wherever you go in any program, without if condition, without enhanced for loop, without collections, we are not writing even a single program also. These are the base functionalities. If you know these 4, how to play with them, then development will be very, very easy, nothing else. In every program, we keep on repeatedly, we are using if condition, for loop, and then collections, and then arrays, all these things we are using always. While loop, do while, very rare. Okay, now let's see. So now let's see what exactly an array, what is the use. Now, how to define the arrays inside your Apex programming, we'll see practically. For example, assume that today I'm defining a variable, integer, some customer code. I'm defining a variable with the name integer customer code. So this is the variable which I have defined. So what is the meaning of this statement? Now this statement is informing to that Apex compiler. Okay, this statement is informing to the Apex compiler that the user has defined a variable, okay, with the name customer code, which is of type integer, which requires 4 bytes of memory. So please reserve 4 bytes of memory for this variable. So it is allocating the 4 bytes of memory over here. It is reserving 4 bytes of memory. It is reserving 4 bytes of memory over there. And then this memory will be pointing to your variable. Okay, this memory will be pointing to your variable. So whatever the variable that we have to this variable, it is going to be pointing to this memory will be pointing to the variable here. This memory will be pointing to this variable. So in this memory, what is the value it will store? Have we assigned any value? No, we haven't assigned any value. Then what is the value will be storing by Salesforce by default? In this variable, in this memory location, Salesforce is filling up the value called as null. So by default, it will store the value as null. In this variables, it will be storing the default value as null. Now, it is storing the default value as null. Suppose, for example, after few lines of code, I'm assigning some value. Customer code equals to 4,500. I'm assigning the value 4,500 for the variable customer code. So whenever you are assigning this value 4,500, what will happen? This statement is informing to the Apex compiler, please store this value 4,500 inside the memory location reserved for the variable customer code. So this value will be getting placed. So whatever the previous value is there null, that value will be getting replaced. That value will gone, and then you will be getting a new value that is 4,500. Now, suppose for example, I'm writing few lines of code over here. I'm writing few lines of code. After writing few lines of code, I'm assigning some value. Customer code equals to 14,000. Then what will happen in this case? What is the meaning of this statement? Please store this value 14,000 inside the memory location reserved for the variable customer code. So in this case, whatever the value 14,000 is available, this 14,000 value will be getting replacing inside this memory location over here. It will replace the value. Whatever the previous value 4,500, that value will be getting lost. That value will be getting lost. So the previous value 4,500 will be getting lost, and it will be storing the value called as 14,000. So that means what? Inside a normal variable, how many values it is storing at a time? Only one. Okay, it is storing the value as only one. When you try to assign a new value, the previous value will be getting lost. Whenever I'm assigning a new value, previous value will be overriding with the new value over here. Okay, previous value will be overridden with the new value. So the previous value will be getting lost, and it will be storing the new value over here. But sometimes I need a variable where exactly I want to store multiple values, not only one, multiple values I would like to store. Now, so as of now, whatever the variables I have defined, in that variable, it is storing only one value. When I try to assign the new value, previous value has been lost. But I don't want to lose a value. I want to store multiple values inside a single variable. So whenever if you want to store the multiple values inside a single variable, then we have to use the help of a feature called as arrays. Okay, we have to use the help of a feature called as arrays. Then what exactly an array? Array contains a collection of values of similar data type. Array contains a collection of values of similar data type. That means not only one value. Here what happened? I have stored one value here, and then I have stored another value. So whenever I'm assigning new value, previous value has been gone. Previous value has been overridden with the new value here. In this case, okay, now in this case, whenever if you want to override, okay, whenever if you want to override the values, then we can go with the normal variables. But sometimes I don't want to lose these values, both the values I want. I want to store both the values inside a single variable. So at that time, we can go with the help of arrays. When coming to the array, array allows us to store a collection of elements of similar data type. That means same data type elements we can store, not the different types of elements. Like as one integer, one double, one decimal, one string, not like that. Everything will be same data type. Now, so now arrays allows us to store a collection of elements of same data type over there. Then how can we define this array inside your Apex programming? Now let's see practically in this case. Now, so now in this case, let's see the syntax. Whenever if you want to define an array, we have to specify the data type first. That means what type of elements the array can store. Data type, give that square braces, and then specify the array name equals to new data type, new data type, and then array size. Okay, array size. So this is the syntax we have to follow. So this is the syntax which we have to follow in order to define an array. Now, so now here in this case, how can we do this one? Now, so when coming to the array, we are going to be defining the array by using this syntax. Specify the data type, specify the square braces. I will give you each and every format one by one. Give the array name, with which name you want to define an array. Give the keyword new, and then data type, and then size. So this is the format which we have to follow, okay, in order to define an array inside your Apex programming language. Now let's see here. I'm defining an array. I'm defining an array like this here. You can specify the data type, give the square braces, array name equals to new data type, and then size. We can specify the data type and the size. So now here I'm indicating that specify the data type, array name, new data type, and the size. This is the array syntax. Now let me verify that. Let me explain each and every functionality, each and every feature. Let me explain what exactly each and every part will indicate to you. What exactly each and every part will indicate. Okay, let me explain. Now, so now here in this case, data type, this is representing that what type of data the variable can hold. That means array can store what type of data. Type of values. Type of values can be held inside this array. That will be indicating by the data type. Next. So now in this array, what type of values it will store? Will it be storing numerical or decimal or string or what? What type of values it will be storing inside this? And then the braces is called as dimensions. Okay, this is called as dimensions. So what exactly the dimension indicates? Dimensions is a part of the array which will be informing to the Apex compiler that user has defined a variable with this name, but this is not a normal variable, this is an array variable. Okay, this is an array variable which will be holding some collection of elements inside this. Which will be holding some collection of elements inside it. So when coming to this array, so now this array dimension is indicating that, so now this is the array variable. This is not a normal variable which is holding one value. This is an array which will be holding some collection of elements inside this. Then what is that array name? So now we are indicating the array name over here. Name of the array. And then new keyword. And then new keyword. So now this is a new keyword. What it will do? New keyword is going to be allocating the memory. It will allocate the memory here. It will allocate the memory. So that means what? Whenever I'm storing some values here, okay, not only one, multiple values I'm storing inside the array, then how we can able to allocate the memory? So that here this new keyword will be taking care of allocating the memory. How much memory will be allocating depends upon the size. What do you mean by size? Size indicates number of elements. Number of elements can be stored inside the array. So the size indicates number of elements can be stored inside this array. So how many number of elements can be stored inside the array? That will be indicated by the size. You want to store 5 values, 10 values, 20 values, 100 values, 1000 values, or what? We can indicate that size also, which will be indicating number of elements. So now here in this case, upon defining the array, we have to specify the data type, which will be indicating what type of elements the array can hold. And then the dimensions is a keyword which will be informing to the Apex compiler, the user has defined a variable with the name, this is the name the user has defined, which is an array type. It is not a normal variable, this is an array type. So please allocate the memory based on the size and based on the data type. Depends upon the data type, depends upon the size which they have indicated. Please calculate the memory and allocate that memory for that array variable here. That will be taken care by the new keyword. So that here memory allocation will be done by new keyword, and then the size is indicating how many number of elements the array can store. But this size will be fixed. Once the array has been defined with a size of 10, we can store only 10 values. We can't increase the size, we can't decrease the size at one time. So array size is fixed size, which cannot be dynamic. We can't increase, we can't decrease the size. That is a problem in array. The second problem is when coming to the array, arrays will store only similar type of element, same data type element. That means homogeneous elements. So arrays are purely storing homogeneous elements. That means similar data type elements can be stored inside the array, not dissimilar data types. Different types of elements can't be stored inside the array. Only the similar data type elements can be stored inside your array over here. So these are few problems are available. We'll see the problems in array and how can we extend by using the feature called as collections. Also we'll see as part of collections concept.
The types means here you mean to say the data type?
Yes. Okay. Now. So now here in this case, how can we define an array? How the memory will be getting allocated here? Let me explain practically. For example, I'm defining an array. For example, I'm defining an array. Integer customer codes equals to new integer of some 10. New integer of some 10. So I have defined a variable with the name customer codes, but this is not a normal variable. This is an array variable which will be holding some 10 integer elements inside this. It can store 10 integer elements inside this, not multiple, not more than 10. So this is an array variable name which I have given over here. Now in this case, whenever I'm writing this statement, what it will do, this array is indicating that the user can store 10 integer elements inside this. Maximum of 10 integer elements we can able to store inside this. We can store 10 integer elements inside this array. So now in this case, what Salesforce will do internally? As soon as whenever I'm going to be defining this array internally, Apex compiler is going to be assigning the memory. How much memory it will allocate here? How many bytes of memory will be getting allocated? 40 bytes.
40.
Why 40 bytes here? So not 10 elements here. Each integer element will be taking how many bytes? 4 bytes. 4 into 10, 40 bytes of memory will be getting reserved over here. So Salesforce is allocating 40 bytes of memory. It will be reserving 40 bytes of memory over here. So this is a 40 bytes of memory. 40 bytes of memory. Who will do the calculation over here? This calculation will be done by this new keyboard here. Now 40 bytes of memory will be getting reserved, and then this memory will be pointing to this array variable. It will be allocating this memory to that variable here. Okay, it will be allocating the memory to that array variable. So now in this 40 bytes, how many partitions are available? What is the size of array? 10. So it can store 10 elements over here. So whatever the array size is available, based on the size, this entire 40 bytes of memory will be dividing to the various small partitions. Whatever the memory is available, the memory will be dividing to the various partitions of equal size. So it is dividing this whole memory over here into the various partitions. It will divide the memory into the various partitions over here. So whatever the 40 bits of memory is available, this memory will be dividing to the various partitions. Now, so whatever the memory 40 bytes of memory is available, this 40 bytes of memory will be dividing to the various equal partitions. Now, so now let's see in this case here. So this is a various partition, 10 partitions are available. Now each and every partition is having 4 bytes of memory. This is 4 bytes, and this is having 4 bytes of memory. This is also having 4 bytes. 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 This is also 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 4 bytes. So all are equal partitions. All are equal partitions over here. Now, to identify each and every partition, it is going to be allocating the index position. Okay, for every partition, it is allocating an index position. So now that index position is always starting from 0. So this is that index position 0, this is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3. Sorry. And this is the index position 3, and this is the index position 4. This is the index position 5. This is the index position 6. And this is the index position 7. This is the index position 8. This is the index position 9. So these are the index positions. Each and every partition will be getting identified by using an index position which always starts from 0. So that here when coming to the array, whenever I'm defining the array, automatically Salesforce is going to be allocating the memory depends upon the number of elements. That means depends upon the size, depends upon the data type, the memory will be getting allocated, and that memory will be dividing to the various equals partitions. Each partition will be having the same amount of memory over here, and every partition will be getting identified by using the index position starting from 0. So in this case, how can we identify this partition over here? So now here, how can we identify this partition? Now let me explain. Each and every partition can be getting identified by using array name along with the index position. Like for example, this partition can be getting identified by using what is the array name over here? Customer codes. Customer codes of 0. That means, so now in this array, customer code 0th partition, this is the value. Second one, customer codes of 1. Customer codes of 1. And the third one here, customer codes of 2. Okay, like that you will be having 9 partitions, 10 partitions are available here. Total 10 partitions are available. Customer codes of 9. So these are partitions. So whenever if you want to identify each and every partition, we have to use the array name along with the index position also. Okay, we have to use array name along with index position also. Based on the array name and based on the index position, we can able to identify each and every element separately over there. Now, so in this case, when coming to that elements, these are the partitions are available. What is the value will be storing by default inside this partition? By default, Salesforce is going to storing the default value as null. Okay, now this is also null. Here 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 also null. This is also null value. This is also null value. This is also null value. That means what here it is going to be allocating the default value as null. This much of functionality will be happening internally whenever I'm defining this a single statement here. Whenever I'm writing a single line of code like this, it will be performing this much of operation inside your Salesforce instance. So now whenever I'm going to be defining an array, so now this dimensions keyword is informing to the Apex compiler. So this is an array variable. This is not a normal variable. This is an array variable. So please allocate the memory by calculating based on the data type, based on that size. Based on the size and based on the data type, please calculate that and then reserve the required amount of memory. So that Salesforce is going to be allocating that much of memory inside a specific location. That memory will be divided into the various equal partitions based on the size, and then each and every partition will be identified by using index position, which always starts from 0. So in each and every partition, by default, it is storing the default value as null. So every partition can be identified by using array name along with index position over here. Customer codes of 0, customer codes of 1, customer codes of 2, customer codes of 9. Like that, we can able to identify every partition by using array name along with the index position. This is the internal functionality of Salesforce. So once the array has been getting defined, how can we store the values? How can we assign the values inside this array here? Now let's see practically. So then how can we assign the values?
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. Before we proceed, can you please let us know the keyword new, exact, what is the purpose?
New keyword is going to be taking care of allocating the memory location. In order to allocate the memory, how much memory is required? Okay, it will be calculating at runtime. It will be calculating that how much memory will be required. So here, as part of this array, it will calculate, depends upon the data type, depends upon the size which you have indicated. It will calculate how much memory is required. That much of memory will be getting allocated by this new keyword. The memory allocation part will be taken care by new keyword. Now, so now here in this case, once the array has been getting defined, then how it is we can able to store the values inside this. So once the array has been getting defined, then how can we assign the values inside this? How can we store the values inside this? Now let's see practically in this case. So how can we store the values here? That means assigning the values, because it is storing the default value as null. But I don't want to store the default value as null. I want to assign. Assigning values. How can we assign the values for this array variables here? Now let's see. Now, how can we assign the values for this array variables? Now let's see. If we want to assign the value for the array variable, then we have to use this syntax. We have to specify the array name of index position. Array name of index position, and then we can assign the value. Array name of index position, and then we can assign the value. Suppose, for example, I'm assigning the value over here. What is my array name? Customer codes. Customer codes of 0 equals to some 4,500. I'm assigning the value. Customer codes of 0 equals to 4,500. In this case, what will happen? This statement is informing to the Apex compiler, please store the value 4,500 inside the array variable customer codes at the index position 0. So then what it will do, whatever the value is available, it will be collecting this value. This value it will be storing inside this memory location 0. Inside my customer codes array, in the 0th location, it is storing this value. Okay, this is the meaning of this statement. So then like that similar way, we can assign the values over here for the remaining variables also. So I would like to specify customer codes of 1. I'm assigning the value some 10. And the customer codes of 2. I'm assigning the value like as some 450. I'm assigning this value. So that here in this case, inside this memory locations, it will be storing the value. In the index position 1, it will be storing the value 10. In the index position 2, it will be storing some different value over here. Here it will be storing the value 10. Here it will be storing the value 450. Like that, here we can assign the value for each and every partition. If we did not assign any value for the array variable, then by default, Salesforce is storing the default value as empty. That means null value will be storing by Salesforce by default over here. Okay, Salesforce will be storing the default value as null. So now here in this case, whenever if you want to assign the value, we have to use the array name along with the index position, and then you can assign the value which you want to store. Suppose after assigning all the values, how can we retrieve the values from the array here? Retrieving the values. How can we get the value? We have to use the syntax. We can specify array name along with index position. Okay, array name along with index position. So this is the syntax we have to follow. Syntax array name along with index position. Suppose for example, I want to print the values. Suppose for example, I want to print the values. Like a system.debug element value. I want to indicate. How can we get the first element value? What is the array name? Customer codes. Customer codes of 0. We can collect this value. And then system.debug element value is, I want to indicate that. Customer codes of 1. Like that, here we can able to print each and every value as well. It depends upon your requirement. We can print each and every value also. So that whenever we are going to be defining the array, this is the syntax we have to follow. We have to define the array by using this particular syntax over here. This is the internal functionality will be happening by Salesforce. Once the array has been getting defined, then upon definition, Salesforce is assigning the default value as null. Then this is the way we are going to be assigning the value. This is the way we are going to be retrieving the value from the array. Upon assigning the value, we have to specify the name of the array along with index position. In which partition we would like to store this value, we have to indicate that index position. And then which partition value you want to collect, we can specify array name of index position, we can specify. So this is the way we can assign, this is the way we can retrieve. Then how can we do this one practically? We'll see in tomorrow's session.
In early basis, can I write all the values that I want to enter?
Yes, right, we can do that. I will give you the multiple formats also. Okay, tomorrow I will give you the practical example. There I will show you how can we retrieve these values, how to assign in one shot, how to retrieve in one shot by using for loops also. We'll see practically in tomorrow's session. In tomorrow's session, we'll see the practical concept of arrays, and then with that one, we'll be completing the fundamental basics. Then we'll enter into the concept of object-oriented programming. That means OOPS concept. Okay. From there, we'll be discussing about classes, objects, everything. Okay.
Actually, how many number of elements we can able to put there?
Sorry?
Okay. Only 10 we can able to put, or can
No. Here in this array, we can store only 10 elements of type integer because I've given the size as 10. You can't store 10 elements.
No, in real
okay, you can't.
Actually, how many elements we can able to put there?
No, there is no limitation at
Maximum.
all. There is no limitation at all. You can able to specify the 20 lakhs also, 20,000 also, whatever, anything. Okay.
Okay.
We can store n number of values also inside this. Okay.
Sure.